Hi, you're watching Rizal's ASEAN with me, Rizal Zulkifli. And in the days leading up to GE14, let's talk about women empowerment, gaps in the education system, and also social enterprises in Malaysia. With me, Rizal Zulkifli, let's begin. Amelia, as a woman and also as a social entrepreneur, we look at what you do in the field of education to address the gaps in the education system, to provide support to teachers. But in the days leading up to GE14, let's look at it from a bigger point of view, from different angles. What are some of your main concerns right now? And how do we address issues like gaps in the education system, female empowerment in this country, and the rise of social entrepreneurs and social enterprises in this country to address gaps in other systems throughout the country?
So I think maybe I'll just address the issue of like women empowerment, right? I think like, I realized that there's a lot of women, a lot of movements actually, basically trying to get women to like lean in, you know, a lot of these movements that try to get women to step up, right? And I think for a period of time, I wasn't really connected to these events because I've always wondered, like, you know, why is there a need for female empowerment, right? Because I think the life that I went through, I felt always empowered. And I think it's because of my education, right? Because of the people I've surrounded myself with. I never felt that I was lesser than a man. You know, I've always felt like I had the same opportunities. Because I used to work in an investment bank. And I had a lot of female bosses in positions of power. So I was really used to seeing that. And because of that, the exposure that I had, I never felt lesser than a man. But I am also aware, like just now that I've been in education and I see how, how girls, you know, are not in STEM, you know, like science, you know, and technology, they feel intimidated by that. I think it's also because, just drawing from my personal experience, it feels like it's really important to be able to see women in power, right? So that young girls get to see that, you know, I want to be like that, right? Because a lot of times when you see people in power, it's usually men, like sitting in a boardroom, you know, a CEO is usually male, right? I think in Malaysia, we're doing quite well in terms of having women in power, but I think like we should be able to display that more, right?
Especially during an election, a very momentous moment in history, especially for a nation like Malaysia. We see that every 5 years. Do you see this as an avenue for leaders to make a change and to feature more female candidates, more, you know, because we're looking at 50-50 female-male ratio. Should there be more female candidates?
Yeah, definitely. You know, there are definitely. I mean, in the sphere I work with, I see a lot of women who are very capable, who are great leaders, and I think, like, you know, it's not just a trend; it's a global trend, right? And Malaysia, as part of the global world, will eventually be part of this movement as well. You see this in movies, right? More female in female roles that are very powerful, you know, female heroes, and these things feed well, right? And so I think for the next general election, definitely, you know, I think there are a lot of capable female leaders and they definitely should be fielded. Yeah.
And you mentioned that education was very important to you because through education you felt empowered.
Yes.
Let's talk about education and your role in 100% project.
Yes.
Let's talk about that and how has that, or how has 100% project addressed gaps in the education system, especially with regards to making classroom a bit more fun fun for students to learn something.
So our mission in 100% Project is really to empower the teacher, because we really believe that in order for us to make any large changes in education, we have to basically empower the teacher first, because you're kind of like your frontline soldiers, right? They're the ones who are in classrooms every day. They're the ones who have direct access to the students, and it's so important that they are given all the resources and support they need in order to do what they do best, which is to teach. And so, like, what we do in 100% Project is not about making classes more fun, right? It's about making sure that a teacher, right, is empowered enough to engage their classroom, you know, to figure out solutions within the community. What we believe that teachers are actually can be the leaders of not just their school, but also their community. The impact that they can create can go a lot wider than just one individual student. And so what we do, aside from crowdfunding, is also provide workshops, you know, for teachers, you know, on leadership skills, you know, on basically providing them with the support and not just in professional development, but also in emotional support, so that they're able to feel that they're valued. I think the one thing that we don't do well enough in Malaysia is to really value the teacher, and that's what our platform wants to do. We want to tell the stories of teachers so that people understand that at the end of the day, like, these are the unsung heroes of Malaysia, and they can do with our support and respect. Yeah.
But for 100% Project to be getting the response, the very good response that it's getting now, it clearly shows that there was a gap before, or there were gaps before in the education system that was not addressed properly for teachers to be able to become empowered and also carry out their duties very well. What do you make of that? And the rise of social enterprises in Malaysia as well is addressing the gaps in the system. What do you make of that?
Yeah, so I think, like, how we started the platform really is because I was in this organization called Teach for Malaysia, and that phase in my life really got me to be exposed to the education landscape and speak to a lot of teachers, right? And what I realized was, at a point, teachers were not getting the resources and support they need. So what teachers did was that they oftentimes used their own money to pay for a lot of the classroom activities that they wanted to do, after school projects, or even like sometimes fun field trips for students, because they want their students to have so much more. And it was because of this we saw this problem that my co-founder and we then decided, like, let's build a tech platform so that these teachers' stories can be told. So the reason why the platform has been successful is because Malaysians actually care a lot about education. We want to give back, but we don't often hear these stories, you know, because the stories are within, like, in all these rural areas, and how often do we actually get to these places, right? And so the beauty of the platform and using technology is to enable these stories from all across Malaysia to be told, right? And they're exposed, and the public can basically go onto the platform and basically read all these stories about all these amazing teachers, right? And so for me, I'm really happy, you know. I think we had a hunch, you know, in the beginning when we created this platform, that education is definitely something that's very close to Malaysians' hearts, and it is true, you know, from the response that we've seen from the platform.
And the platform has also allowed people to participate in the nation-building process when it comes to providing for teachers and classrooms across the nation, right? How has, do you think, what has the response been so far from the funders?
Yeah, so, like, I think we've, in terms of funders, so we connect not just individuals to schools, we also connect corporations, and basically that's the kind of work that we do. We are kind of like the intermediary to connect your general Malaysians to these stories in schools. And yeah, a lot of them, what we realize is that a lot of them actually want to help, but they don't know exactly what schools are in need, you know, or what kind of help they can offer, and that's where we come in, right? Usually what we see is a lot of mismatch in terms of the things that certain people want to do and what the teachers actually need, and I think that's where we come in, so that the allocation of funds are more efficient and the right kind of resources go to the right kind of teachers, you know, the right kind of projects. Yeah.
Let's talk about the nation after the election. There's going to be a very dynamic period in the days leading up to the election. But after that, there's always a need for reconciliation, for people to come together and build a nation moving forward. What do you make of that period? And why is it important for young people like yourself, with a vision and aspiration and hopes, to move forward what are some of the challenges to making sure that people are united and move forward to build a nation after the election?
I think people need to realize that at the end of the day, right, life has to go on, right? And things still need to happen. And whether you're elated or you're disappointed, right? I mean, of course, in every election, there is going to be a bunch of disappointed people. But I think the main thing is to think long term, right? And I think for people who are my generation, in our generation, we need to realize that in 10, 20 years, we will inherit this country. We will inherit the mantle of leadership in this country. And, you know, if we don't move forward, then we're stuck, right? And for me, what inspired me to do this was that I know I love my country a lot. I know there are gaps, you know, within the country that I'm frustrated about or I think can be improved. And for me, it's like instead of complaining about it and being dejected, you know, let's do something about it, right? You don't have to be in power to do something powerful, right? You can do something powerful now. And, you know, and eventually 10, 20 years from now, you know, you'll find yourself in a position that can make a large impact. And so I feel like people need to think long term, right? And it is important for us to come together after every election across the world. It is important for people to come together because that's where we can make the best impact. Yeah.
And how do we get more people like you and your team and more social entrepreneurs out there to contribute to the nation?
I think like it's getting people to realize that, you know, all you have to do is just start. You know, if you find, you don't have to build a company to make an impact. Sometimes it's about changing the way you think, you know, or changing your mindset, you know, and just be positive about the country. Because, you know, we need to believe in the potential of Malaysia. And I think like I can say this for every Malaysian, you know, we know there are things that about our country that we love, you know, and I think the common thing was basically like food, right? You know, people love food, you know, our culture. And I think it's to really be able to identify our strengths, right? Because there are, right? And to see what kind of role can we play to amplify those strengths. And yeah, and get people just involved, even in small ways, to volunteer, you know, or just, you know, if you see rubbish on the road, just pick it up, you know, just lead by example, be the change you want to see, right? And it always starts from the individual, right?
What are some of the areas that you see still need support and help from social entrepreneurs or from young people with ideas and the resources out there?
Okay, so I think like the thing that young people can do is that because I think we're a generation that's a lot more connected, right? And we're more connected to global trends as well, right? And I think that is something that's very valuable that the previous generation did not have. You know, I think we should capitalize on that. And for me, why I've put myself in education is because I feel like the thing that is hindering Malaysia, in certain sense, is inequality, right? Not just the poor and the rich, but also inequality amongst, you know, our people, right? And we need to first solve that before we can address like the bigger questions of inequality. So, because our generation is more connected globally, I think like we share more common interests, you know, we're always connected, and I think like that can be something that we can use, you know, to really spread this awareness, you know, of why it's important, why unity is important, why diversity is strength, right? And yeah, I think that's what the young people in Malaysia can do and tap in on.
If we talk about the election, the previous election and the elections before that, I think the main concentrations would be on providing infrastructure to a lot of people out there, both rural and the urban voters. But as we move forward, there are more issues that we need to address. You mentioned inequality.
Yes.
How do we address gender pay gaps?
Yeah.
How do we address gender equality? How do we address getting more women to be part of the economy and ensuring that these women get the support that they need to be part of the economy? How do we address issues that are happening globally and continuously penetrating into the nation via technology, via social media?
Yeah.
How do we address things like that?
It's all an educational process, right, at the end of the day. And I think like, I know for a fact that, you know, when I trace back, you know, why is it that I have, I've never seen myself as lesser than a man. I think it's because of all the influences in my life, all the female leaders I've met in my life, right? So education is really important, right? To get not just girls, but girls and boys, to understand the importance of equality, the importance of having diversity in the workplace. What is fair? What is fairness? Why, at the end of the day, when the world is fair, everyone benefits, right? So I think all that needs to happen in school, right? And not just need to happen in school, but within families as well and communities as well. And I think, like, at the end of the day, sorry, your question was like, how do we address?
Yeah, how do we address that, and how do we ensure that Malaysia is not left behind when it comes to providing or trying to provide or going towards a more equal society? So I think you mentioned education.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
you know,
So I guess just not just education, but I think like giving, like having a platform to speak, is important, right? And so like like a platform like this, for people to be able to see women in roles and hearing women opinions, right? And I think what we try to do is also create platforms for students, right, in schools, right, through competitions, through public speaking, getting more girls involved in things like this, so that they're used to voicing out their opinions and getting society to be able to see that whether you're male or female, right, you have a right to speak, and you can advocate for things that you believe in, and that you both love your country and you can contribute whether you're male or female.
So let's look at the response that you've got from the schools and teachers and students participating in the 100% project. Have you seen any difference in the way they approach education and the way they approach a particular subject or the experiences? What response have you got so far from these participants?
Yeah. So I think the beauty of like the platform was that I got to see how immensely passionate our teachers are, that you can have a teacher who's like in this rural school, but they're actually trying to fundraise for a robotics class, and bring technology into the school, and I think it's not so much so of like the platform basically aids teachers to basically bring their ideas into reality. I wouldn't say that we seed these ideas in teachers. It comes from them, right? But I think the beauty of the platform is because when these projects get funded, they inspire other teachers to do the same. So it's basically the platform essentially is a storytelling platform, right? Because you get like, when people notice that, wow, look at this teacher. This teacher is like based off in Sampurna, but he's basically raising funds, getting his friends, spending extra hours to try to contribute to the students' life, bringing technology, giving them access to knowledge around the world. And he's able to do it with everyone's support, right? And then you have teachers who probably face the same problems within their own communities, and being able to see a teacher take charge, right? Take charge, and then not only take charge, but have the support of the community to make this happen. It then inspires another generation of teachers that will do the same.
So what's next for 100% project? What are the areas that you want to go in, and how do you see yourself making an impact in the future?
All right. So we are we're really excited, about all the different opportunities that are coming our way, right? So our main focus is really to build to enable to build technological solutions that actually work for teachers. We know that the future that we'll inherit is going to be a very different one, where automation is going to come in, artificial intelligence, and the world we live in 10, 20 years from now is going to be very different, and the way we teach our children is going to be very different, and the tools that teachers may need in order to conduct classes is going to be very different as well. And so we want to be able to help teachers utilize technology to make themselves more efficient. So that's something that we're working on. The other thing that we want to do is also help teachers prepare kids for the future, because we know for a fact that by 2020 a statistic says that 5 million jobs will be lost to automation, and right now the way kids are being taught in school is still very traditional. So that shift is going to happen, it's coming, but how do we prepare for that, right? So things like problem solving, critical thinking, communication, digital media literacy, all these things are going to be incredibly important for kids to be able to be employable in the future. And we want to basically help teachers out, with creating an environment in school where kids are exposed to these skill sets. So those are one of the few things that we're working on.
Thank you very much, Amelia, for joining us
Thank
on
you.
Results ASEAN. And that's all the time we have for this week's episode of Results ASEAN. Tune in for more great insights into the bright young minds in Southeast Asia. I am Rizal for Results ASEAN. Thank you.